Hello everyone. I want to share my testimony and share how God's worked in my life. Starting from the very beginning, it was my first time sharing my testimony, and I wrote some notes to keep me on in the timeline and try to keep it as short as possible and not try to make it over an hour. So bear with me. So it all started, I feel like, once upon a time, but once upon a time, my dad, he was in the army back in the early 80s, and he was stationed in Korea for a short time. That's when he met my mom, and through about a buddy of his, and she became pregnant, and then they got married. And so then they came to the United States to have me. She was roughly about 6 months pregnant when she came to the States. She barely knew any English. And so then I was born. And from there we moved, because being in the military, so born in so I was an army brat. And for the first 10 years, shortly after my 10th birthday, my parents divorced. But in between that time, we moved a handful of times. My sister was born, and then I had a brother. And then also during that time, like my upbringing, because my dad was in the army, he wasn't around a whole lot. I didn't have a lot of memories of him that I can recall. Of course, my mom was around, and we always went to church. As long as I can remember, we always went to church. We went to a church that spoke Korean and English because of my dad. And then after my parents divorced, we went to a Korean church. So I was brought up in church, knew about Jesus and the Bible and all of that. And then let me see. So so life changed. My parents got divorced, obviously, and then we moved. Shortly after the divorce, we moved into government housing, with, of course, a single mother with 3 children, and she was always working on the time. Then I didn't see my mom a lot, and then since church was a part of her life, so it was working church, and so we kind of like raised ourselves. From then on, I remember inherently I took on the mom role. No one told me to do it. And I still act like the quote-unquote mom at times. I try not to be, but I became the responsible one. Not saying I was always responsible, but just try to be there and support my siblings, and because my mom worked so much, to be there for their games, their concerts, and what have you. So, and yeah, I always felt neglected or rejected, or didn't feel like I was important enough for my mom to. She went to one choir concert, I remember, in 9th grade, but other than that, she didn't attend anything else. So, which hurt me. But I knew she had to work, but at the same time, I wanted time with her as well. So, you know how that goes. But anyway, so trying to go through my notes. But anyways, so we're going to a Korean church, and after about a year, my mom decided. So I remember I was about 11 years old. She told us to go to an English church, so we started going to a Baptist church, and it wasn't long after we started, because I remember I was in 6th grade. It wasn't long after that I answered to the altar call, and I prayed the prayer and received salvation and asked Jesus to be a part of my life. I didn't know what all that entailed, and what that included. I didn't receive any discipleship. No one told me, what to do here on, from then on. So from then, so even though I said the prayer and everything, I lived like the rest of the world, as what they call a lukewarm Christian. So that was my life. I went to church for maybe a couple hours on a Sunday once a week, and maybe sometimes Wednesdays or Saturdays, but that was it. So I lived like a world and was a quote unquote Christian just once or twice a week. And then so that went on. And another thing too, I didn't really like reading books anyway growing up either. So of course I didn't read the Bible at all. I heard a lot I heard Bible stories and things like that, and so I would memorize stories, but it didn't, I don't know, it didn't really like impact me or affect me much. So it was just kind of more like head knowledge. So I had a lot of head knowledge about the Bible and what and what not to do. So at least I did have a conscience, and I know that the Holy Spirit guided me throughout my upbringing and whatnot. But anyway, so I grew up sheltered, didn't really do much. I remember middle school was hard anyway. I dealt with a lot at the age of 11 between receiving salvation, being in middle school. I started being more promiscuous and being curious about my sexuality, and in doing middle school years is really hard, especially in human development, and you're going through puberty and but also during that time, I don't know if my promiscuity in sexual interest happened before or after this incident, but I remember there was one time I can't remember who was with me, but we had got off the bus from school. I think it was a couple friends, because my siblings were in elementary school still. And then so as we were walking home, there was a house that was torn down. There was a lot of trash left behind. So we went and just went over there because we were kids and we're curious and to see what we could find, and found a dirty magazine, which that was the first time seeing things really in that way. And then so I don't remember if that happened before. I don't know if that's what spurred off, kicked off my images and my thoughts and things like that and my behavior. But anyway, so that's roundabout when it all started. And also on top of that, I was having a lot of weird sensations, and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't think I should get into that too much, but we've all been there. Our body acts weird and does things, and no one really explained that to me. So kind of figure things out for yourself, I guess you can say. And plus, my mom wasn't home a lot of the time, so we just figured out with our friends or what we saw or experienced. Anyway, so because I didn't have a strong relationship with my father, I didn't know the love of Christ, because I wasn't feeding myself spiritually. I wasn't reading the Bible, things like that. I didn't have a relationship with Christ, so I didn't know the love of a father, between a physical father and my heavenly father. And the relationship with my earthly father was okay. It was pretty non-existent. So I didn't know. And a lot of people say that women, who have daddy issues, who you don't have a good relationship with a father, they tend to be in relationships with guys who are not good for them, and they can't discern what a good guy is and be able to discern in that regard. So, and plus they don't have much value for themselves, they don't respect themselves and whatnot, and no one spoke words of affirmation over them. So that's what happened with me. And so, like anyone, we all want love, we all want to be accepted, and I was very naive. I'll have to admit, I was very naive, and of course I want to be loved, and I was naive, and I was a people pleaser. That's the word I was thinking about. I was a really big people pleaser. That's something that I still struggle with a little bit, but it's not as bad as it used to be. So I struggle with that a lot. So that was just a mix of, and plus I was sexually intrigued and everything like that. So that's like, I'm brewing a hot mess right there, and you see where this is going. But anyways, let me continue. So it wasn't until high school, especially my senior year, I still hadn't had a boyfriend, and I wanted a boyfriend, and so I don't know what it was. I don't know if I was the problem or what, but I got tired of waiting around. I can be pretty, the whole feminism thing has been around for years, and so in American culture, it's women can be very aggressive, and so I ended up being like that. So I saw relationships, and there was only 2 guys at the time in my senior year, because I got tired of waiting and waiting. So I did it myself. Got turned down both times, but I didn't take it personal. It was more like I did it just to get out of the way and just say yes or no or whatever. And so I figured out the truth and just went on with my life, kind of thing. So, but I ended up having my first boyfriend later that same senior year, with a guy who was younger than me from church, from youth group. And so we dated briefly. My mom broke it off, I think a little after 6 months or whatever, because I lost my virginity to him, and then I told my mom I thought I was pregnant, and so yeah, that kind of ended things. And then yeah, and so I didn't understand this at the time, but now I know that I idolized men and relationships because I had the crave or the desire, the need, the longing to be loved. And I know especially women can relate to us because we're emotional creatures. We're more emotional, and I really wanted to be loved. And I did some dumb stuff. I do some off the wall stuff. You probably thought I was crazy to try to keep a guy. But anyway, so I just went on from there. I'm not going to go into every single relationship that much, but I continued to try to find love and try to be loved, and tried so hard for guys to like me and to stay in the relationship. But for whatever reason, it would only last for about a couple years. So, and I didn't know how to be single or stay, and I didn't want to be alone. And so I struggled with that. And so it seems like it was a constant revolving door of relationships. It wouldn't take long for me to get into another one. If a guy was interested and I was interested, and it's like, okay, and just start another one, kind of thing. And so I had no discernment. I didn't really care. I just cared about the physical, you look good kind of thing. You make me laugh. And yeah, even though they really weren't good guys. And of course I continued to have sex outside of marriage, and that went on. I think it was until, oh no, sorry, scratch that. Oh, I almost forgot this. I'm gonna go track back a little bit. So when I graduated high school, I was 17, but I turned 18 that summer. And when I turned 18, I went wild. I started getting tattoos and piercings. And I was doing drugs. It started off small. My first encounter with drugs, I was just trying to find work, and I went to apply for a server at a strip club, but they didn't have an opening, but they had openings for dancers, and I ended up being one. You're 18, you don't care, right? And so I did that. Thank God it only lasted 3 days because my mother, she found out. But even in the short 3 days, there was one girl who also worked there, and then she got me to try X for the first time. And then we went to a club. We did this after work. So that's how my history with drugs started. It was something small like that. And so I went from being sheltered and being a good girl, I was a good girl pretty much all the way up until I was 18. And then, just lost it from there. Me and my mom got into fights. I was still staying with her. I told her I was an adult and I can do whatever I want to do, and that kind of thing. And I kept sneaking out of the house, and I was just being a wild child. So anyway, so between me and my mom, because that kept going on, I didn't want to deal with her anymore. So I ended up getting married. I should not have done that. But anyways, I did get married. Didn't really know the guy very long. I didn't do it for the right reasons. So I didn't know or understand the importance of marriage and what it's for. But anyway, so got married, and it was still full of drugs. This when the drugs got worse. At the time, it was the summer after. So I was still 18, but shortly before I turned 19. And he was a soldier, and he was a year older than me. And a crack house lived behind us, because we didn't make a lot of money. And then, so we lived in a ghetto part of town. But I will talk about what happened one time. We didn't get married. We didn't stay married very long. But there was one time I almost OD'd. We had a handful because my husband, he was dealing drugs, and for this one guy. And so the drug dealer and a handful of people, because we stayed in a duplex, a handful of people came over. And so we had 2 bedrooms, so we stayed in the spare bedroom. So it was all a little small room. We're all crowded around. And they had this, and now I was trying new things. I think it was called horse tranquilizer, but they called it K. This was a long time ago, so I don't know if people still do this. But anyway, so I was doing K and Coke and speed on top of ecstasy. And so I think they called it a roller coaster from what I remember, but it's where you get all 4 of those, and it's a powder, and then you mix it all together, and then you just snort it. You make Lina snort it. So one night while we were having this gathering at our place, the drug dealer, every so often he will give me a line. I didn't ask for it. because like once, of course, you're not sober when you're on drugs or when you drink or anything. So I lost my judgment, and so every time it was put in front of me, I did it again. And so reasoning went out the door. I couldn't tell you how many lines I did. I want to guess maybe 3 or 4. And this happened so long ago. But anyways, after a period of time, I started feeling very funny. I'm trying to remember back a long time ago, but I think the room was spinning. Or no, what I do remember, I was feeling sick and I needed to puke. So I crawled to my bedroom, to the toilet, to throw up. And I remember going to the toilet and looking at the toilet, and it looked like I was hallucinating. So it looked very far away. I puked my guts out. I feel miserable, obviously. And then I crawled to the bed. Some people, I think a few people got to me because they realized, obviously I was not okay because I was throwing up. And then they came to check on me. And then there was 3 people in front of me, and they all had one eye, so they looked like cyclopses. And I guess I was going into a K-hole, and that's what they said. And so the way to get out of a K-hole is with sugar. So they were feeding me sugar to help me get out of this because I was tripping really bad. So they fed me sugar, and so I finally calmed down. I was fine after that. It took a little bit. The next day I felt like poop, obviously. But one of the guys that checked up on me, who helped me get out of the K-hole, he was actually a drug dealer as well. And because of what happened to me, he decided to quit that. So it all happened for good. And that same guy who stopped dealing drugs, I found out a handful of months later, he told me that the drug dealer was giving me so much drugs to try to overdose me. He's trying to kill me on purpose because I didn't know that he was gay and was trying to get my husband, which I thought was very bizarre. So anyway, so yeah, I almost died that day. But anyway, so continuing on from there, I couldn't deal with it anymore with my husband. I left him, I started working because I don't think I was working at the time. So I started working, and then started liking the manager there, who was older. Got into another relationship, and let's see, because I was 19 when shortly after. I was 19 and he was 27, so he was 8 years older than me, and grew up in 2 different decades. It's very interesting. But anyways, he was an ex-Marine, and he had anger issues. We didn't really do drugs or whatever, but we still, had sex or whatever. And it was, I could tell, like looking back, I can tell he was manipulative and stuff. And we did smoke weed. He had a friend that smoked weed quite a bit, and I couldn't take it anymore after he wasn't working, and I was young. I was 21 by this time, and supporting him and paying his bills and enabling him with his beer and his cigarettes. And at the time, we were taking care of his mom's house because she wasn't living there. And so every time I tried to leave, he would talk me into staying. So I didn't have a spine back in the day. And so, so I left him the night that he went camping, and within a week's time got an advancement on a paycheck. got my things together, found a place and all that, and left him without him being there. And so that was the only one I could get out. So thank God he helped me find a way out of that. And yeah. Anyways, so after that, I was 21. Of course, I was able to drink. I was single, and you know what that means. So I started. So I was smoking. Yeah, I was smoking cigarettes, and I was partying. Yeah, because by then I was smoking, and I was anyway. So I was smoking, I was partying, I was drinking, you know, doing whatever, being with random dudes, and yeah, pretty much just living the life, I guess you can say, and just doing whatever I wanted. I didn't go to church. If I did, it was here and there. I didn't really go to church at all. I think when I turned 18, that's when I stopped going to church. You know, why go? You know, it's kind of like you're living in sins. Why go somewhere? You know, you don't want to go to a holy place when you're living in sin like that. But there are plenty of people who live a double life. But anyway, I didn't go to church. Shortly after, I met my second husband, and then we ended up getting married because we thought we were pregnant at the time, and so we ended up getting married. Didn't know each other very long, and this was around the time that Saddam Hussein got captured when we got married. So we got married. I ended up getting pregnant, and then so that started something, a relationship. But I think we were together for like a little over 4 years. We both weren't ready for children. We both weren't ready for marriage. We went to church, but we didn't have a good relationship with the Lord. We had a bunch of head knowledge. We knew about the Bible, what the Bible said, but we didn't obey it, really. We didn't love God. Definitely didn't love each other. I wasn't a good wife, and he definitely wasn't a good husband. We both weren't perfect, but there was adultery, a lot of verbal abuse, emotional abuse and stuff. But you know, so for me it was abusive. Not saying I didn't do things that got on his nerves or anything like that, but yeah, for me it was verbal and emotional abuse. I wasn't holy. After about a couple years, I ended up cheating on him as well, and yeah, so we didn't honor our marriage at all. We would have gotten divorced the time I was pregnant with our second, but you know, in the state of Texas, you can't get divorced when a woman is pregnant. So we continued on. He also got me to join the military, so I joined the Army, and we were both deployed. I deployed after the second one, and then we got divorced after the deployment. And then so I was done with that. After that, I was in another one because I got into another relationship. We were both still married. He was, we both ended up getting divorced, I believe that same year. And lived together, got a house and all that stuff, and living in sin, obviously, just living however we wanted. Never got married, never had any children with one another. We just had our own from our previous marriage, and then that lasted about a couple years. So I guess, my second husband was the longest, but around 2 years is when it was pretty much done. But legally we were married for a little over 4 years. So anyways, so after that, I was just all over the place. I'm just going to fast forward to 2020. That's when my life really shifted and really changed. So in between my last relationship with the one I had with, we had our own children, so I don't want to throw names out. It was just a continuous in and out of relationships, sleeping with whoever, and just living life however. And so it was May. COVID happened obviously in March, in May of 2020. And I started having problems with alcohol and stuff, I think around April, because personal stuff that happened with the girls, and I couldn't, because of COVID, I couldn't see my children for my youngest birthday. I couldn't have visitation because I originally, with that situation, I had custody, and then he ended up having him. So I was because plus I was busy with going to college and working and things like that, and I wasn't fit, and he was married, and so he took care of the girls. So I did what was best for them. And so anyways, 2020 hit. I lost my job in May, and that's when things started going downhill. I was having a problem with drinking and smoking. I started doing drugs here and there, hanging around with the wrong people. I was smoking meth, and it's just one thing after another. Things was happening. I was having problems with my car. I was living, because I wasn't really looking for a job. I would try, but I just pretty much did whatever I wanted to do. I was just living carelessly. I took out my 401k, whatever money I had, and just lived off of it pretty much. I put the car note in the house on deferment, and you can, so the house and the car were on deferment payment. They were deferred. The payments were deferred. So I didn't have to worry about the big bills, and so it's just the little stuff. So I was loose with my money. It was nuts. I was very erratic. I did some random stuff. I didn't want to be home. I guess being home was very depressing. I didn't want to be alone. I'm more of an extroverted kind of person, so I want to be about people. I wanted to see people, wanted to be around people. That's where I got my energy from. Next, I was going on road trips. I was driving here, driving there, I was doing a lot of random stuff, like taking care of animals. I had so many cats in my home, and oh my goodness, I had a few dogs. But it was nuts. I was having mental breakdowns. And it was a spiral of events. So much that, I can't even recall what the timeline is. I was just all over the place. I call that period like my heydays, my crazy days. I was literally nuts. And I was very manic or very depressed. I wasn't really stable. I wasn't stable at all. I wasn't emotionally stable. I wasn't mentally stable. and I ended up having, and plus I was in relationships I shouldn't be in, and having sex with guys and things like that. It was just, I was just doing whatever. But anyway, I don't want to hold on to that. Went to a psych ward. I remember I went to a psych ward. The first time was a few days. They had diagnosed me with bipolar 1. And they wanted me to stay, but I didn't want to stay. Because there you're not allowed to smoke, and I want to smoke and do whatever I want to do. I was like, I'll be fine. I was there a week later, and that time I stayed there a week. And that time I knew I needed help. So I was better. I can't remember. I don't think I was smoking at the time, but I can't remember all that. But anyway, so I was in the psych ward a week later, stayed there for a week, got out. I remember my mom told me that it's God's will for me to go to the prayer house. And this was July of 2020. I didn't want to go. So I said, let me take care of some things and I'll go. Well, I kept putting it off. My life still kept going out of the loop. And still getting to horrible relationships and not being stable, and just life doors were closing. I tried to get help and things like that because I was trying to get money, or trying to get a job, or trying to get assistance or anything, but it was, or even getting money to do drugs. Like I was just trying to do whatever I can to get whatever I wanted. But I was not okay. And then the funniest, well, it's kind of funny to me, but the last straw was September, beginning September of 2020. I had the kitchen sink got clogged, and then I just couldn't handle the stress anymore. I couldn't handle the stress. Because by then I barely had any money. People were paying to pay my electric bill. I was just a hot mess. Sleeping in my car sometimes because of the AC, because it was hot, because it was summer. It was not okay. But anyway, so the kitchen sink clogged. I couldn't handle it anymore. I broke. I called my mom. I can't remember if I called my mom, but I remember that happened, and that Sunday